Welcome everyone. I think we've got about 18 people on the line at the moment. I think we'll probably expect a few more shortly, but anyway, I'll just introduce myself. So I'm Phil Horton, the RWA's Environment and Sustainability Manager, and I thought I'd just let you know what the team that I work within does. So we cover the Green Blue, the joint programme we run with British Marine. We also operate the RWA's own sustainability strategy that we're working on at the moment with Olivia Wells, the main person focused on the kind of internal side of things. We do planning with Richard Hill, who looks at marine licenses and other planning applications and their implications for recreational boating. And we've also got Kat Palmer in the team, who's our team administrator, although a couple of those people are actually on furlough at the moment. So we all sit within the wider cruising government and legal affairs team, which is about 18 people in total. And they've all been very busy over the last few weeks during lockdown, liaising with government and other NGOs to represent the sport and to communicate kind of current guidance to our members. So just on the kind of where we are at the moment, there's obviously a lot of increased public awareness out there around sustainability issues because of the lockdown. So here we've got seals on the Thames. We've got a headline which said Costa del Solent, looking at the Solent there in Portsmouth. Goats in Llandudno, and whether this is actually due to reduced disturbance that these creatures are where they are, or whether it's just general increased awareness, we're not sure. But certainly there's an increased focus on wildlife and our wider environment at the moment, and it can only be a good thing, really. And we need to maintain that post-lockdown. So what I'm hoping to do is to run through a few of the kind of key environmental issues as we see them at the moment, and the resources that are available to you as clubs and instructors and training centres to put that information out to your members and to the people that you interact with, and also hopefully some kind of practical ideas about the things we can do at the moment. So the kind of key global issues at the moment really are climate change and biodiversity loss. You can see here the kind of Arctic sea ice extent on the top left there, record lows over the last few years. And obviously we're seeing quite an increase in the level of extinctions we're seeing in the wildlife side of things, biodiversity side of things as well. So these kind of key areas that we're looking at here will address both of those. So obviously it's climate change, wildlife, protection, waste, so the waste that ends up in the oceans in many cases, and water pollution. So that's thinking not so much of plastics and so on, but the kind of chemicals and oils and fuels and so on that we can end up inadvertently introducing into our environment. So before we go into some more details on those, I just want to make sure that you're all aware of the Green Blue. So this is, as I say, the programme we've run for the last 15 years now with British Marine. There's some really useful resources on there. We upgraded the website last year, and so there's resources there for individuals, for clubs, centres and associations, and also for marine businesses. There's resources, there's news, there's campaigning information on there, written green guides for boaters, there's video guides, instructor resources, things you can take on the water with you, educational activities for younger children taking part, and you can also follow the Green Blue on social media. There's the @thegreenblue tag for that. So it's a really useful resource. Again, I'd be really pleased to have feedback from people over time on what else you would like to see on there, what other things would be useful to you. We're always updating it, we're always adding more information and resources. So coming on to the kind of wildlife side of things, these are some kind of key protected species around the UK. There's a basking shark, top left there. They tend to be found off headlands, and they move very slowly and close to the water surface. They tend to be quite a collision risk for craft, and they're also very vulnerable to plastics pollution. As you can see, they go around soaking up taking in huge volumes of water and any pollution that happens to be in there at the time. Puffins, they're a protected species found nesting on cliff faces. And obviously one of our favourites, the dolphins. There are 5 varieties in UK waters, and some are more curious than others. So don't always presume they want to ride the bow wave and be friendly towards you. Some of them do, and some of them don't. So yes, the map on the right here, I was talking about the marine protected areas. So as I say, most of these designations are actually UK ones, so they will definitely stay in place from the end of this year, and we believe that the European designations will remain as well. We don't think there'll be any changes there. I mean, the key thing with these areas is that they're mainly focused on fishing and other activities. They're not really an issue for recreational boaters. There's only a couple of these that actually create any form of navigation restrictions, and those are actually shown on charts. All of the others we can essentially sail through, but we need to be just aware as we go through them what they're designated for, and what creatures we should be looking out for, and what protections are in place to make sure that we don't interfere with any of that wildlife. So just to give you an idea of some of the kind of animal behaviours, I mean, these seals we see quite often basking on rocks, and the reason they're there is they're usually there to digest their food, and they find their way onto the rocks at high tide. They don't usually like to try and scramble on and off the rocks because they can injure themselves when they're doing that, and they use a lot of energy doing that as well. So when we see them, we should try to stay clear of them, and if they start to look at us, then we should be aware that they're kind of taking fright and they're thinking they might move off, which wouldn't do them any good really. So they're both digesting their food and they're sunning themselves as well, so keeping themselves warm. So that kind of animal behaviour is something that we need to be a little bit aware of when we're approaching wildlife. So one of the key things that we should be talking to our students about when we're talking to them about the best way to approach wildlife is not to approach from front or behind, because that's seen either as kind of predator behaviour or as challenging behaviour if you're coming from the front. So we should try to keep 100 meters away from these creatures as best we can, unless they approach us. So we should come in from the side at a 45-degree angle, staying 100 meters off, and have a good set of binoculars on hand to actually view them properly. So yeah, just making sure we don't increase their stress levels, reduce their feeding, and so on. And the other key thing we shouldn't be doing is we shouldn't be cutting across their path, because either in front or behind, because we may be separating them from their young as well. So particularly with the basking shark and so on, the young are quite a significant distance away. So yeah, the 5 top tips that you'll find the Green Blue website are: find out what animals are there, slow right down, 5 knots or no wake, keep a consistent course, no erratic movements, keep your distance, and keep quiet, and that's voices and engine noise as well. So moving on to the next area of concern, anchoring. So you'll see on the right-hand side here an image of boats at anchor and boats mooring in seagrass beds and the areas that are scoured out by the chains. So habitats like this are really important for particular fish and seahorses and so on, but also they're nursery areas for important food fish as well. So and about a square metre of seagrass produces roughly 10 litres of oxygen a day, and they're also known to be quite significant carbon sinks. And these areas have been massively reduced over the last century around our coasts, mainly not due to recreational boating, but unfortunately the areas that are left tend to be in areas that we like to anchor in and areas where we have moorings. So we need to be aware of these when we're anchoring and try to avoid vegetated areas wherever we can. So we're involved now as the RWA with a recreation remedies project, which is a EU Life funded project with all of these other partners, which is looking at the issues around seagrass, and it's looking to install a large number of advanced mooring systems around the coast, which will remove the chain element of the mooring, so that we can reduce that scouring effect in areas where they're causing that problem. So we've got various marinas and harbours on board as well, because they're interested from the point of view of the swinging space of the boats and whether they can, well, either they may well be able to increase the density of moorings, but also looking at whether you need to replace the conventional moorings in an area entirely with advanced mooring systems all at the same time in order to keep the same swinging behaviour of the boats. But this is something we're working on over the next 3 to 4 years. So we'll be monitoring the impact, seeing whether the seagrass recovers. And part of the project is also to replant seagrass in some of those scoured out areas. So in terms of anchoring and making sure we minimise our effects, ideally in advance we should be planning where to anchor to avoid these protected areas and these sensitive areas. Try to use existing moorings and pontoons, ideally use the advanced moorings if they're available. And if we can, then anchor away from vegetated areas and think about how much chain we put out, think about the weather conditions and whether we're going to swing a lot and whether we're going to kind of damage those inadvertently. So yeah, making sure we've got the right anchor down so it doesn't drag, flaking out the correct amount of chain, checking boat position, making sure we're not dragging, and when we remove the anchor, don't drag it through the seabed, but move forwards onto the above the anchor and then pull it out in that way. And all of these things are kind of good seamanship, really, good practice in any case. And we'll be working with Emma and others in the training team to make sure we kind of cover these issues within the books that we put out around all of our navigation courses and our seamanship courses as well. So yeah, it's a kind of key area really for us in terms of biodiversity and habitat protection, that we try to prevent more damage to these areas. Third area we're looking at is invasive non-native species. We've been involved for a long time now with the Check Clean Dry partnership within the UK, so making sure we don't spread these species around the coast. It's a particular issue inland actually, where we get enclosed water bodies which can get badly affected by weed growth and so on, spread by recreational boats. But it's becoming an increasing concern around the coast as well. So we're seeing a lot of these creatures now in marinas and in enclosed areas that are protected from tidal flushing and so on. And as we move along the coast, we can easily spread these around. So it's really important that if we have our boats in the water all the time, we try to keep them as clean as possible. So obviously the right antifouls and so on, but also if there's a buildup of a biofilm on the bottom of your boat, then if you have the opportunity as the tide goes out to wipe that off with a cloth so that you don't encourage the buildup of more invasive species later on. Obviously, if you stay in the same area year round, it's less of an issue. It's more of an issue if you tend to move between water bodies and along the coast. So as I was saying, we've promoted for a long time the Check Clean Dry initiative. This is more applicable really to trailed boats and to dinghies and so on. But when a boat comes out of the water, we should be checking it for visible animal and plant matter. We should put that in the bin if we find it. We should clean everything down with water from the area where we've been sailing. And then we should try to dry our equipment and our boat as best we can before we put it into another water body, because that will vastly reduce the chances of the species surviving and moving on to other areas. Anti-fouling, it's really important that we choose the right anti-foul for the area where we're going to be sailing. They vary hugely in their behaviours and how well they work with different creatures. There's obviously paints, there's ultrasonication, looking at these ultrasound devices on the bottoms of boats. We're trying to do a bit more research on that at the moment to find out how effective they are. There's the upcoming new silicone type approach to it and vinyl types as well. But we need to be really aware when we apply these materials that we don't allow any of the material to get into the water. So ideally, we should be doing all of this work in a bunded area that doesn't allow any of the wash down that we create back into the water, and certainly doesn't allow any of the paint that we're applying into the water before it's properly cured. So another campaign that we've been running is the Protect, Collect, Dispose one. So either ideally use a filtered washdown facility. There aren't many of those around the coast yet, but as a minimum, make sure you put a tarpaulin under the boat and you collect all of the material that you wash off as you spray wash your boat. And then when you apply the fresh material, if you have to sand the boat first, then use a vacuum sander or wet sand to reduce the production of dust. And then ideally use a roller and a drip tray and a tarp under the boat to collect any of the materials as you apply the new material. And anything that you use when applying anti-foul should really be considered as hazardous waste once it's finished with, and you should put it in the appropriate bins in your marina or boatyard. The other issues around pollution are really things you use to wash your boat down with, and the things you use in your sinks, and also the kind of black water side of things as well. So we really need to avoid the use of phosphate containing cleaners, chlorine and bleach containing cleaners, because they go straight into the water if we wash down the decks with them, and they can cause problems particularly for mollusks and the build-up of algae then if you increase the amount of nutrients in the water. So we should also be avoiding microplastics. That's a big concern at the moment in the media. A lot of things that have polyethylene in them, to have little beads of plastic in to help with cleaning, they will go straight into the water and they bioaccumulate, and they can find actually the way into our food chain as well. We're not entirely clear yet whether they cause significant harm, but we should be taking the precautionary principle here and avoiding them wherever possible. So oils and fuels, we need to make sure when handling those, we have spill kits available. You can use fuel collars when you're filling to capture fuel drips. Put a bilge filter in your boat to extract oil. Ideally, avoid auto pumping bilge pumps, because you can't check whether they are pumping out pollutants into the water if you're not there at the time. Obviously, if you leave the boat for a long time, you have to have some sort of automated system, but make sure you have a filter on the system to capture those pollutants. There are these super spouts you can use with handheld fuel bottles, which has an airlock to stop overfilling, and you can put fuel whistles on the tank in the boat so that you can hear when the tank's getting full and avoid overfilling and spillage that way. But one of the key things here is to make sure you have the spill kits available. So if you do spill anything into the water, it's really easy to clear it up straight away with appropriate materials. And again, those would be disposed of in hazardous waste. Black water and sewage. So this is an increasing problem as we get large collections of boats now that we've been allowed to go sailing again. Ideally, we should use onshore toilet facilities wherever possible, have a holding tank in the boat, purchase a boat with a holding tank, and then use pump out facilities. We're having a bit of a discussion at the minute with the Environment Agency, some issues with them being concerned about boats pumping out into the sea, and our position being that there need to be more pump out facilities around the coast. They keep asking us to look at the Baltic Sea, where this is strictly controlled, and the way they've controlled it there is by having 2,500 pump out facilities around the coast of Sweden, for example, and then they don't enforce it through talking to boaters, because they know that if the facility's there, people will use them. So the MARPOL guidance actually for larger boats is to only discharge when more than 3 miles offshore. So it's something we need to be very aware of, really. We're sharing the water with other water users as well as with all the other creatures in there, and none of us want to see sewage in our environment, really. So waste, obviously we should be looking at the kind of refuse, reduce, reuse, recycle approach to reducing our waste in the first place. But one of the things we need to be quite aware of as boaters is making sure things don't inadvertently find their way into the water. So it's about purchasing the right products in the first place without the plastic packaging wherever possible. Avoiding working on your boat on the water with materials that you might lose over the side. Again, avoid products with microplastics. So it's not just the cleaning products, it's things like toothpastes and cosmetics and other cleaning products. And we shouldn't, as we know, throw anything over the side, but that also includes food products. So things like orange peel can take up to 2 to 3 years to biodegrade in salt water. So they're not really just food for the fishes sometimes, they just collect down there, and they're unsightly, and they can actually cause problems for some of the smaller creatures down there. So make sure we secure everything on board, make sure we don't inadvertently pollute our environment, and we don't certainly end up with plastics going over the side. So those are kind of key things that are messages that the Green Blue is putting out at the moment. I just wanted to quickly run through some of the things that the RYA is doing as well, and also how we can start helping training centres and clubs to reduce their own impacts. So we've been developing our own sustainability strategy over the last year or so. We've consulted with about 200 people at 25 different workshops. So that's staff and committee members and clubs and instructors and so on as well. It's been drafted and reviewed, and we're preparing a kind of communications plan now ready for launch. So we've split our activities into 3 areas really. So the things that we control, which is our kind of staff and facilities, the things we manage, which would be events and things like that, and the areas of influence that we have, which is really working with people like ourselves, with clubs and training centres and the wider boating community. So these are the kind of key reference points that we've taken from that. The symbols here are the Framework Convention on Climate Change, the Convention on Biological Diversity. We've looked at the IOC and the World Sailing strategies as well, sustainability strategies, and we've signed up for the UN Global Compact, which is a kind of broad-ranging business-focused organisation that looks at not just the environment but also labour issues and things like it's basically the whole of the UN global goals, so human rights, anti-corruption, and those kind of things as well. And we've tried to address those in our strategy. So we're now looking at kind of pathways to zero, really, within that kind of control, manage, influence side of things. So obviously our facilities and operations we can cover quite easily ourselves. So we've switched over to a green energy supplier for Hamble and Portland. On the event side of things, we've started looking at ISO 20021, which is an international standard for event management, for sustainable event management. But we've also included in our strategy to look at things like our investments, you know, our resources, our pensions, and that kind of thing as well. And obviously on the influencing side of things, a lot of that's driven through the Green Blue, but also through our relationships with other sports bodies and so on as well, such as BASIS, which is the British Association for Sustainability in Sport that we're involved with. So the way I've been thinking about this for training centres and clubs, and this is where we could do with a bit of feedback really, is thinking about these kind of pathways down to zero. So thinking about carbon and energy. So you'd start at the top with energy supply. It's relatively cheap and easy to change your energy supply over to a green supplier. You then start thinking about the gas that you might use in heating. So moving to electric heating starts to cost you a bit more money. We might look at biofuels in our existing fleet of support boats. Start then moving on to things like electric ribs, which start getting much more expensive, and the impacts are maybe less than those initial things that we can do. And then we might start thinking about putting in our own renewable energy generation and start feeding back into the grid and having a kind of net positive impact. So these kind of pathways down, you have a big impact at the top for relatively little cost. Oh, so it's gone down to, and then you have a kind of increasing cost and probably a lower impact as you move down through that. So what I'm planning to do is to start looking at ways we can put together guidance for clubs and training centres on how they might follow through these thought processes to have the maximum impact for the minimum resource. And then on the energy side, you'd start with draft roofing your building, lagging pipes and tanks and things, roof insulation. And then as you move down through heating controls and replacement windows, again, you start getting into more expensive and lower impact aspects of it that ultimately, as we go to carbon zero, we will need to do, but we should start with those higher impact, lower cost things as well. So, and then, you know, start thinking about the same approach for waste and pollution, reduce and reuse and recycle, processing of food wastes, planning, catering better, zero plastics, refillables and so on for waste. Again, kind of moving down that impact scale to try to get to net zero. And then pollution, invasive non-native species, check, clean, dry is cheap, easy to do. Fuel handling is something we should be doing carefully anyway. Zero phosphate cleaners, using the correct antifouls. And then we start getting onto the more expensive things like providing bunded washdown facilities and so on. So over the next year or so, we're going to be starting to, well, we're going to put together these plans for the RYA itself. and then we're going to be liaising with British Marine and our other stakeholders and thinking about these pathways to zero for everybody else as well, and thinking of ways we can help you to do that. It's probably more difficult to do the kind of pollution and waste side of things than it is to do some of the energy side of things. But as I say, we're hoping to provide you with more and more guidance on this as we go on. So yeah, that was my brief presentation, and then it's kind of over to you for questions, really. I don't know whether we've got any come through so far, but if not, we could start asking a few questions, and we could maybe unmute a few people if people wanted to join in the conversation. So Emma, have we had anything come through?
Hi Phil, no, we haven't had anything come through yet, but we'll give it a couple of minutes and see if people want to type out the question, or alternatively, if you'd like to ask a question using your microphones, you should see that you've got a little hand symbol which you can use to put your hand up, and then I can unmute you so you can ask your question.
So pumping stations around the Solent has just come up. So if you're on the Green Blue website, there is a pump out directory, and at the moment we've got a student actually phoning around all of the marinas that we're aware of and boatyards that we're aware of to try to update that information, and we're going to try to our coastal atlas, the GIS system that we have, and we're looking at putting that up online as well so that people can find out where those are. I know there's one in at the Harbour Master's office there. I know there's one in Bewley. I don't know all of them, I'm afraid, but there aren't a huge number, I have to say, given the number of boats in the area. So again, we talked to the Environment Agency about this before Cows Week last year, and they were saying how could we improve things. I suggested they provide a temporary pump out barge, but of course, they weren't willing to spend any money on the problem, so we didn't actually get anywhere with that. But yes, if you go to the Green Blue, there is a pump out directory on there, and it should show you where they all are. Okay. Oh, thank you. Thanks to you too. I mean, I'm particularly interested in whether you're aware of the resources that are on the Green Blue, and whether you're finding them useful, and whether there are other things that you might like to see added to that would help, particularly on the training side of things. Everyone's been very quiet today. I mean, what I could do is bring up the Green Blue website, and I can show you where some of these things are. That might be a way to do it. Let's just see if I can do that easily. See whether it's going to cope with all of you online and me doing this at the same time. It's going a bit slow for me, I'm afraid. Okay, so somebody's asking about resources available. So if you're on the Green Blue and you go to the resources section, there's a club, centres and association resources section in there. And if I click on that, there you go. You'll see there are instructor resources, educational activities, which is really for younger children and so on. And then there's an awareness raising toolkit. And within that, we can pull down all sorts of posters and infographics that you can use in emails. So if you're sending information out to potential clients or to people who are coming on courses, you can use these email footers and things like that in there. Green boating guides are all available for download for free, or you can email us. At the moment, you need to email us, and we can send those out to you, so you could hand these out to people. I'm planning to put a booking form online, so you can do it online. At the moment, we're not actually going to the office very much, as I'm sure you can understand, so we're a bit restricted on what we can send out, but ideally that's what we would do over the longer term. So if you were interested in wildlife, you can download this. You just say whether you're a business or an individual, and it'll download the whole PDF of that. As I say, slowly, because I'm talking to you at the moment. Yeah, it's not going to download very well, I don't think. But I'll go back and show you the rest of the site while it tries to do that. Yeah. So normally it works very quickly, but I think this uses quite a lot of bandwidth. So there's posters, and then there are video guides on there as well. So there's some interesting ones on wildlife, and there's one on anti-fouling and that kind of thing as well. But as I say, if there's other things that you're interested in and that would be helpful to you, then please let us know. The instructor resources side of it at the moment is focused more on younger children. There's these quiz cards and video guides. The quiz cards are actually for all ages, so there's questions in there which you can download, or you can ask us for a set of these. They're waterproof, you can take them on the water, the ones that we send out. And they've got questions about pollution, about things, general things to do with boating as well. And there is a version for younger children which has activities as well. Okay. Kate's on the line. She's asked about the environmental checklists. Yeah, so there are environmental checklists on there as well. You can go on there and you can find a checklist for things to do with your club or your centre, the things you should look at in terms of becoming more environmental. And there are also guides on there to producing your own environmental policy and so on as well. So, someone's going to go teach. That's really good. So teaching's happening again. So Doug's gone off teaching. Could you recommend an eco-friendly alternative to Milton for soaking buoyancy aids in between uses in a centre environment? An eco-friendly soap or detergent? Okay, so in terms of cleaning products, if you go to the business directory on here, there are a couple of providers of MARPOL compliant cleaners. If you're just looking for general cleaning products, then any of the kind of eco cleaning products that you would use around the house are suitable. And they might not be MARPOL certified, but they're all biodegradable. And in the current environment, of course, what we should be looking for is things that are basic soaps, really, that will help to kill off the current virus that we have at the moment. So yeah, you'll find those on the business directory. As I say, any other products that are out there that are eco ones like Ecovert and Biode and so on are all suitable really for use on your boat. Further guidance for cleaning kit to be COVID-19 secure. So the sport development team have put together some guidance for clubs and centres on how to clean properly and prepare. So they're the best people to ask about that. If you want to drop an email through to environment@rya.org.uk, I can point you in the direction of that. I don't know exactly where it is on the website at the moment, but I think if you go to the COVID-19 section of our website, they have published some information on that. Build filters, again, I think you'll find some of those in the business directory on the Green Blue web. Examples of those on there. And again, if you're not happy with the examples that are there, then drop us an email to that environment@rya, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can.